So welcome to the Herkimer Central School District Instructional Technology Support Virtual Training Series. Today we're going to be talking about Tinkercad and some of the applications that you may be able to use it in your classroom. And remember, the best part about this is the students are going to be able to make something that they can physically print and use and take home with them. So today in this training, we're really going to cover just the basic stuff. So we're going to talk about getting started, adding and changing shapes and changing sizes. We'll talk about grouping objects, what that means for it. We'll also talk about how you make holes in an object or make an object hollow. And then finally, how do you send it for print? And here at the school, most of our computers should be set up to use the MakerBot printers. You just have to make sure the settings are set the proper way. So let's jump into it. If we go over here to Tinkercad, Tinkercad is just a free Autodesk, kind of like a CAD CAM style system that allows you to create whatever you can think of. Mostly 3D printable objects is what we're going to focus on. You can also use certain files that we'll get into later on that our big laser cutter machine that can use, but that's a little bit later for us. Signing in, you can always use your Google sign-in. The first time it may ask you for some details, but you should be able to use your Google sign-in to this, and what makes it nice and safe for you. Another interesting thing about Tinkercad as it loads here is that it can be shared in peer-to-peer, so you can actually work on something with a partner or multiple people at the same time, just because these files are shareable and editable. One thing to keep note though is sometimes you do have a limit on how long that shareable link is active, and we have had issues in the past where someone goes to share a link and then the second person goes to chime in and it says, oh, you need permission for this. So just beware that that sometimes it doesn't always work perfectly. So here we are in the Autodesk Tinkercad home screen area. You can obviously see there's some classes on stuff. You can actually create classes for your students. If you're interested in doing that, that's something I can show you how to set up at a future time. What makes nice about classes, if you set up a class and all your students are in there, you can bounce through and look at all of their designs and kind of see what they're doing, working on in real time. So in fact, some of these designs are actually not mine, but they're actually students that have shared with me and allowed me to work with them on some of their designs. So I'm going to hit create new design. This is and what we're going to get into is just basic shapes, what all the different things that are out there, so you get an understanding and an idea of what you can do. And this will probably take a little bit to load. No, good, a lot faster. All right, so here's your work plane. This is they'll give you a little tutorial over here that you can go through, which is nice. And anytime you want to look back, you can always look at the notes with the end tool. Here's your cube, so you kind of know what you're looking at. If I rotate the cube around, we can see the back, left, front, top, and all that. I like to work start working in kind of a orientation like this because it kind of gives you an idea. Over here we have our shape sizes. You have your basic shapes. Notice there is a difference between these two, this box and cylinder that are shaded out. These are going to be for making holes. These are actually our solid shapes over here. So we have a bunch of stuff that you can do. You can see, you can go through that. There's also characters, in other words, letters and whatnot. Oh, sorry, these are not characters. These are the different little characters, things you can have. There's connectors. So if you connect a couple things together, if you were to make any houses or something like that. There's some other interesting things. There's pre-made prints like stuff from the Smithsonian, dinosaur bones that you can print out and have put back together. But we're just going to stick into the basic shapes realm. So we're going to start out with a box, and then let's just bring this box in and drag it in here. Right, and we place it in there. Now, we have a bunch of ways to change our shapes. We have these little black dots, this black cone, and then these white dots. Now, the white dots change the physical size of it, whether it be width, length. That's how you're going to change that. The black dots are just going to change one aspect, just this side. So the square is kind of like in the corner, so I can change two sides at once. The black dot is if I just want to change one side. The dot on the circle on the top obviously is just height. And then go above and below. And the cone actually raises it or lowers it above the workspace. And that becomes real important for the students to know, is that you have to make sure it's at the 0 spot here. Otherwise, it's off the work plane and it won't print right. It'll print in the middle of the air, and that can cause problems. We can also use this over here to kind of rotate the object around, so on and so forth. Let's just make kind of a nice big box here and do something like that. And then you can see I've got, you can always double check, make sure it's sitting on the plane, something like that. Okay. I can bring in a second shape, like say the cylinder here. And let's say I want to put this cylinder on top of the square box. So it's important to know that what the square box's height is, which is a height of 31. So I'm going to want to put this at least at 31. And now I know it's going to sit, oh, that's 32. And now I know it'll sit right on top. Okay. I can spin it around to check to see if it's in there. You can also play around with your numbers to make sure that they're correct. If I click on the side, it'll make sure it's 0, 0. Let's put that right in the middle of that, like that. And there, now we've got it. Now, right now, this is according to Tinkercad, this is 2 separate items. This is 2 separate items. But if I want to print as all one thing, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, select my 2 objects, and then, oops, and then I want to group these things. And you see they both turn orange. So that means that they're now 2 objects. It's now 1 object. It went from 2 objects now to 1 object. So now if I go to move this object, it actually moves the whole entire thing. If I were to rescale it or resize it, it would resize the whole entire thing. What these numbers mean right here, I can't remember. I think they're millimeters. We've got 7 millimeter. The size right now would be 26 millimeters by 63 millimeters. I will say one part of Tinkercad that isn't great would be its ruler aspect and trying to measure things. We've had to do a lot of playing around with things when we were trying to build replacement parts in the office. We had to play around with the sizes and shapes. If I click on the ruler, it's not necessarily the greatest of tools. It gives you a nice measurement, but it's never really clear what those measurements are. I believe they're millimeters, so just that's something to keep in mind there. So there we go. We got 2 objects solid together, and we can start building from there. Now, if I wanted to say put a hole in this object, I can bring in this blank cylinder, and I'm going to rotate it down here to 90. And I'm going to make it really long to make sure it's right, so it's wide enough. Then I'm going to bring it into this object, and I'm going to raise it up to, like, say, middle. Oops. And again, I'm going to hold Shift and name the second object, and when I group them, now you'll notice, boom, I've made a hollow object. So now I've got my piece with a hollow object in it. Now it's a matter of bringing in new pieces, making sure they're lined up the way you want them to be lined up, and then grouping them together so they become one thing. All sorts of objects and sizes and things. So if I wanted to make some text here, I could bring it in here. I double click on this. Double click. It should let me. Oh, here we go. If I go pull down the shape and we wanted to change the text, we can do that. And let's say I wanted to bring this up. Bring it up to 90. And now if I wanted to make this part of my design, I could stick it in there. And if I stick it in enough, it will actually be part of the design and be kind of like a lettering that sticks out. Move this over. Let's pull this out a little bit. And again, Shift click. You can group them all together. Becomes one color. Voila. A really great starter activity that I've seen Mr. Aurelio do is make a name tag like for yourself with your name and a bunch of shapes or pieces that would represent who you are. Really obviously great for some art aspects. Ratios and changing things, nice for the math. If you wanted to do something, I've done classes where in STEM where we made little chariots for the sphero balls, trying to figure out which chariot would go across the water the best. And that's a lot of some of the things you can do with that.
Rich, I have a question.
That's really how you build. You build and go from there. Now, there's tons of tutorials out there online how you can take some of these shapes and make them curved and start to build animals. They're great. They're great for putting things together with groups, or if kids want to work on things individually or work with friends. That's really kind of a cool little aspect of that. Oops.
Rich, I have a question.
We want to make sure that when we keep in mind that when we're going to print these, that printing does take a long time, number one. So we want to make sure that we make something big enough that we can take, but small enough that it doesn't take hours and hours and hours to print.
Can I stop you really quick?
Also, something to keep in mind when printing is that see, I have the two letters here hanging out above my block. I go under, you can see that this would need support. Otherwise, this will not print properly. So when designing things, that's something to keep in mind too, is that am I going to need support that this will actually print properly and build properly? Could actually even turn this into like a stamp idea. If I took high and turned it into an inverse, let's see, let's ungroup these. Let's take high. Let's make it hollow. Oops.
Rich, can you hear me?
Click off that. Let's click on high. Make it hollow. Now let's rotate it down.
Rich, can you hear me? Mr. Matthew?
He's on a roll.
Yeah, he's in the zone, that's for sure.
I wonder if this is a recording. Like, it's not really even him.
And if I were to now put this in here and group them, I could actually turn this into a stamp. Take this, let's drop this down a little bit. Let's put these all together again, holding shift, regroup them. And now I've got a stamp. So now all the liquid would stick to the block side, no liquid would stick to the H and the I, and I would have a high block stamp. So just, I don't know, silly ideas. Anyway, so going on from there, we want to print it. The important thing is to export. We want an STL file. You might be able to do an OBJ too, but I usually do STLs. That'll export it. If you were going to do laser cutting, that's what the SVG is for. But now once we export it as an STL, it's downloaded. You can see right here, that's that file ready to go. If I click on that, it'll actually open up the MakerBot app. So you can check to see if that actually is something that's available to you. And it should be ready to print. And that's it. It's ready to go. And that is really kind of the beginner and easy basics of Tinkercad. I suggest highly playing around with it. I'm just checking my file here, and it looks like in MakerBot, and it looks like it's all set to go. So that's it. That's all it is to creating something in Tinkercad. Super easy. I've seen kids as young as elementary school, first grade, create stuff. It doesn't take long for them to figure this stuff out because they're digital natives and they really created some cool things. So that is Tinkercad for beginners. Check it out, try it out, see what you think.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?